All right, so we'll get started in just 5 seconds. So commissioners, just a little rundown. I have a quick proclamation that I'd like to read to get us started today about an important issue. And then we're going to get right into the agenda. We have a full agenda, and we do have executive session. We have 2 executive sessions. We have one for a legal opinion. Hopefully we'll have time to go right into that. And then we have our city clerk quarterly review at 2:30. I know I emailed you this.
Public safety, also 11:30.
And public safety at 11:30. Yeah. I know I emailed you this, but the city manager and I, if we are still in Cow, we are going to scoot out right at 11 to head to Lansing for an important press conference. So if that happens, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Kelly, who's president of the commission, to finish up. And then Commissioner Kelly will be the one that calls the executive session. But hopefully we'll be able to get through the agenda before that and still have time before we need to leave. So I don't see Denavia here today just yet, but I'm going to go ahead and read this proclamation because it's an important one that all of us are firmly supportive of. And I want to make sure the community knows about the important week before us. And then if she does show up, I'll just go ahead and give that to her. So I'd like to share this proclamation and let everyone know about the upcoming National Expungement Week. So this proclamation reads that National Expungement Week is a large-scale movement that was initiated to make sure that 77 million Americans with convictions know their options when it came to expungement. That was never before engendered in West Michigan. Whereas people of color have historically experienced disproportionate criminalization both locally and nationally, and these convictions can restrict access to housing, employment, education, public assistance, and voting rights. And whereas expungement clinics and mass efforts for awareness over the past year have helped hundreds of people across our United States get on the path to legal relief and other additional social services. So whereas community organizations right here in our city, such as Link Up and the NAACP, Greater Grand Rapids, and BPGR are working together with Black and Brown Cannabis Guild to raise awareness of record expungement right here in our city. Now, therefore, I, Rosalind Bliss, Mayor of Grand Rapids, do hereby proclaim September 21st through the 28th as National Expungement Week in Grand Rapids to promote awareness for record expungement as an important way to potentially improve the quality of life for people of all walks of life who consider legal support and awareness a hurdle to securing jobs and opportunities. So we will share this with the community, and please join us. Oh, there's Denavia. I saw you just walk in. So I'm going to hand this to Denavia, and maybe we can get a picture real quick, and then I'm going to ask you to help us raise awareness and spread the word about this important effort.
We can clap on that, can we?
Yeah. Amy's coming up. Take a picture. Thanks for your work.
Thank you so much.
So we'll get a picture. All right, so next that will take us to our first item, commissioners, before us today, and that is a resolution setting a date to consider the adoption of Chapter 105 of Title 7 of the Code of the City of Grand Rapids entitled Marijuana-Related Municipal Licensing. And this is to set a date for October 8th for this to come back before us. So I know we've talked about this. We just had a recent conversation about it at COW, so I'm going to I need a motion.
I'll
Can I
move
get a
it.
motion?
Support.
Thank you. All right, Kristen, you want to tell us about this?
Yes, thank you. We are looking to request that the City Commission set a date of October 8th to consider licensing ordinance to regulate or license marijuana facilities here in the city of Grand Rapids. You may recall, and you just mentioned, that we were here on September the 10th, and we provided the City Commission with an update, kind of a status report of all marijuana regulations in the state of Michigan. Status report of where the Planning Department, Planning Commission is at with regards to received medical marijuana applications, and some analysis of the MyVita and the statistical information that that we collected as part of the medical marijuana applications. And we also had a very preliminary discussion about the concept of a licensing ordinance that would effectively serve, oh, thank you, Landon, that would serve kind of as a discussion point for recreational marijuana here in the city. Thank you, I didn't realize I didn't switch screens. So this licensing ordinance that you have before you today would effectively serve as an opt-in for recreational marijuana, meaning that it would allow for recreational marijuana facilities to operate within the city, as well as medical marijuana facilities that we currently allow. It would require a license as proposed for all marijuana licensing types. So all licenses that are authorized through the state legislations that Landon will discuss further, both for medical and recreational, including the marijuana uses that are authorized under the rules that went part of the recreational marijuana, all of those would be licensed with this, would require a license locally. This would also give us the ability to track commitments that have been given to the city as part of the MyVita applications with medical marijuana. It would provide us with an additional enforcement tool as we use licensing ordinance for other unrelated uses, It would also give us the ability to require basic energy reporting and universal design requirements, and it would require some energy efficiency for marijuana growing. So I'll go over this slide. This may be familiar to you from the last meeting, but very quickly, there's an important date of November 1st, and that's when the state of Michigan will begin accepting recreational marijuana licensing applications. We feel that it is very important that the city of Grand Rapids have an ordinance in place that addresses recreational marijuana prior to that date. So we're proposing the licensing ordinance today as kind of a representation of an action by the city to opt in, allowing marijuana uses. And that would be effective as we've currently got it on the timeline prior to the November 1st. However, we would not begin accepting applications until April 20th of 2020. That will provide us with a 6-month window that allows us to look at our local zoning regulations, because right now our zoning ordinance is silent on recreational marijuana. So it'll provide us time to update and work through that planning commission, that required process. It would also give the clerk's time, city clerk's office time to prepare for the acceptance of licensing, so getting the application, any fee schedules, the ancillary items that go along with the licensing ordinance. I think it's important to know that the zoning approval as structured in the draft licensing ordinance would serve as a temporary license. So it would allow medical facilities to continue to operate or begin operating in that 6-month window. So we would not be holding up any already approved marijuana facilities prior to that date. Mentioned that it would allow us for time for development, to receive public input with the Planning Commission for the zoning ordinance amendments. With that, I will hand it over to Landon, who is serving as our resident expert on marijuana regulations, and go into a little bit more detail about the content of the licensing ordinance.
All right, thank you. As Kristen mentioned, we're looking for a adoption date for this ordinance on October 8th. We have different license types with the statute that was passed by voters last year, and then additionally rules that were released by the Marijuana Regulatory Agency in July. We now have several recreational license types that vary somewhat from the medical license types that have been in place. So you have the provisioning center and medical, which corresponds to the new retailer, which is a recreational retail sales. Growers, processors, secure transporters, and safety compliance facilities are similar to what was previously adopted under medical. But recreational introduces the microbusiness designation, also designated consumption establishment, which is on-site consumption of marijuana products. Temporary marijuana events, which would be 1 to 7 days with sales and consumption on-site as a temporary event, and then event organizers who would organize those events. As you can see in this comparison chart, all the license classes are not necessarily the same, particularly as far as growers go. You have different numbers of plants depending on whether it's medical or recreational. The processors, provisioning centers, et cetera. So they're, again, very equivalent license classes between medical, recreational, and then the new recreational classes that were released by the MRA. this, and I mentioned that the statute versus the administrative rules have slightly different, the administrative rules introduced new license types, and you can see those here. A couple considerations about licenses. Until December 6th of 2021, Class A grower, that's Class A recreational growers up to 100 plants, and micro business licenses can only be issued to Michigan residents. In the same time, for the same time period, Class B and C recreational growers, processors, retailers, and secure transporters can only be issued to current medical marijuana licensees in that time period. The MRA, the regulatory agency, does have the option to change that date as of December 6th of 2020. In addition to the different license types, the licensing ordinance includes some requirements for basic energy efficiency or energy usage for all marijuana types, and then growers would also have a sustainability plan, high efficiency lighting for half the plant canopy, and whole building energy audit, and that's based on the energy use that we've seen that growers use to grow cannabis. Also some universal design standards, and then procedures for license denials and suspensions, revocations if needed. So our decision points today, in addition to will you set October 8th as a date to adopt this ordinance, is considering which uses should be allowed or licensed, or both. And again, the draft ordinance, based on our feedback from last time, requires licenses for all license types. And then also do any regulations need to be added or removed. I'd love to take any questions if you have them.
Great. Thank you, Landon. So today is, I just want to be clear, today is a publication for this come back to us in October. So we have time to really think through the language as well as get input from the community, because it'll be published today and made available to the public to review. So if we have additional input, we still have time to do that before the ultimate adoption of the licensing in November. That's our goal, right? By the end of October to have it adopted.
Certainly, if you were to adopt this ordinance on October 8th, it would then go into effect on the 19th.
Okay, thank you, thanks. All right, commissioners, Commissioner Leonard?
I just have a quick question about whether we would want to do a public hearing. I think, recreational marijuana is different than medical. And so we've heard from the community, we had a number of opportunities for the community to weigh in with medical marijuana. And I'm just wondering, as I'm looking at the timeline, if we would want to infuse a public hearing in there at some point so that we can get feedback. Because I think, there will be people who are following this who will know that it's open and we're having this conversation today. But unless we kind of publish a public hearing, we may not hear from others who may not be following this as closely.
I'll let Landon respond to that. This is just for the license, and it gives us time between now and April to work through the recreational marijuana language. And I anticipate we'll have multiple public hearings, not just our body, but also the Planning Commission.
But it does include which licenses we're going to allow in the city. And so I think that's the piece that I think would be beneficial to hear from the public on.
Landon?
As far as that timing goes, if you were to include a public hearing for this ordinance, we could still fit that in just barely. It would go into effect on November 2nd, although that's a Saturday. So the likelihood of causing problems there would be slight, but that would be after the date that the state would start accepting recreational marijuana applications. As you mentioned, Mayor, there is time built in the way that this is proposed, so that we'd have time, about 6 months, to have additional public feedback and discussion on what uses would be allowed. The licensing ordinance here, even though it represents an opt-in, is essentially just putting some rule on the book to make sure that we don't have the absence of a regulation by the time that the state starts accepting applications. So that 6 months of time would allow for reasonable land use regulations, for example, to be put into place.
But you also said that today you would want us to make the determination about which licenses to allow. Did I hear that correctly?
Some initial input would be great. If you feel that the licensing ordinance as proposed, which requires licenses for all types, should be changed, we could certainly make those modifications before the adoption date on October 8th, if that's how you choose to proceed.
So if I'm saying to you that today, I would want to hear from others on this. So, I think that's the dilemma that I'm in, that you're asking for feedback, and I haven't gotten an opportunity to
Mayor.
get feedback.
Mayor.
That's the challenge for me.
Mayor,
Sure, go ahead,
and I
'cause
wanted to.
It is a little confusing.
yeah.
Go ahead.
So the proposal in your packet is the staff recommendation that has licensings for all uses. What we are saying, it would be helpful if we had feedback today, but it doesn't have to just be today. It could be any time between now and the 8th. And so you can give your feedback to the staff. You can get feedback from the public. If we were to delay on the 8th, we'd have one more opportunity on the 22nd. That would be the absolutely last day. So we will, our recommendation is to move forward since there's going to be a long engagement process on the zoning uses. But if there's a desire from the body, we would, I think we would be looking at adjusting our intent for the 8th and change and add a date on the 22nd, but that would be up to the body. But this was staff's recommendation.
Well, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I thought the licensing language that we need to get put in place gives us a window where, I actually said it at the last meeting, I think every use should be part of the license. All of them should be licensed. But that even after a license is in place, because we have a 6-month window, we can always make determinations to make amendments. If we decide not to allow a certain type of use, that we still have time to make that decision, even though we captured it in the license. So this is to provide an opportunity for us to have more time, also to be in compliant with state law, and send a message to the community that, yes, we intend to opt in, however, we need time to work on it, but still give us time to make adjustments as needed before anything is finalized and we start taking applications in April. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, that was my understanding. So Commissioner, is that clear? We talked a little bit about this at our last meeting, but we will still have time to make adjustments based on use if we want to do that.
Okay.
And for that matter, adjustments based on which license types, which should be licensed or not. This could be looked at as even a draft, but we need to have something in place by November 1st so that we're prepared in case an application were to come into the state, that we'd have some regulations either opting in or opting out for any license type. And that could be changed, but that 6-month window before we start accepting applications gives us that flexibility. So as long as we address each license type somehow by November 1st, we're safe.
Okay, Commissioner?
Yeah, and I think that to allay some of your concerns, I think this is like, you're kind of giving yourself double layer of protection here, in the sense that it takes a land use approval and a licensing approval to be able to operate. So if we establish a licensing thing that is essentially requiring every possible type to be licensed, you still can't operate unless we create the land use framework to do so. So it's just putting it all in place, and you can ratchet it back if you need to later on.
Okay, yeah, good point. Commissioners?
Yeah, I would just like to ask staff to provide us with some feedback about what other states are doing, particularly around licensing secure transporters and safety compliance facilities when you have a chance. As we move forward, it'd be good to have that information.
Yeah, good point. All right, so this will be back before us on October 8th. Any other questions or comments? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? It carries. All right, next that will take us to a resolution establishing an industrial development district for Falk Production LLC at 1782 North Ridge Northwest, and this is in Walkerview.
So moved.
Support?
All right, so Commissioners, we heard comments on this. We had a public hearing at our last meeting. Ms. Wood is here to share any additional information.
No additional information. The district and the application are both related to a production facility for Walkerview. This will result in 30 new employees and an estimated investment of $8 million. Pretty remarkable project.
Yeah, great. Any questions or comments? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, next, this is a companion. It's a resolution approving an application for an industrial facilities exemption certificate filed by Falk Production for an $8 million project located at the same location at 1782 North Ridge.
Moved.
Support?
All right, any final comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. Next is a resolution establishing an industrial development district for E-Agile at 1880 Turner Avenue Northwest.
So moved.
Support.
All right. Ms. Wood, you want to tell us about this?
This is a transfer, and I think it's important to note that eAgile is a manufacturer of RFID tagging. This is a really unique project where it was a startup probably almost 20 years ago now and has continued to grow in the city of Grand Rapids and fortunately found a location at Hines Avenue. So this is going to transfer their existing personal property investment and building improvements, and they have approximately 30 new jobs, or 30 jobs, adding 7 new as a result of this new location.
Great, thanks. Commissioners, any questions? We also had a public hearing on this at our last meeting. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, and this is another companion with that. It's a resolution approving the transfer of the personal property component of the industrial facilities exemption certificate for eAgile at 110 Hines and 1880 Turner. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Support.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, next we'll take us to a resolution establishing an obsolete property rehabilitation district pursuant to PA 146 of 2000 for Pottery Lane LLC at 710 Wealthy Street Southeast.
So moved.
Support.
All right,
Again, we held a public hearing on this one. This is a rehab of an existing building at 710 Wealthy Southeast where the new occupant will be improving the one-story structure and putting their pottery business in there. Also, 3 full-time equivalent jobs with an average wage of $15.40 an hour will be created as a result of this investment. So really nice reuse of a functionally obsolete building in a business district.
great, thanks. Any questions, commissioners? Be nice to see this building put back into use. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, that takes us to a resolution approving a 10-year obsolete property rehabilitation exemption certificate pursuant to PA 146 of 2000 for the same project, Pottery Lane LLC at 710 Wealthy Street.
So moved.
Support.
All right, any final thoughts? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, next that will take us to a resolution accepting the Southtown Business Area Specific Plan for release for public comment for amendments to the 2002 Grand Rapids Master Plan. Can I get a motion?
So move.
Support.
All right, and let's see. I have down Ms. Turkelson, but come on up.
Hi, Layla
Hi.
Islani,
Hi.
Planning Department. Good morning, thank you for having us today. We're excited to be here. We're here to talk about the Southtown Business Area Specific Plan, which is going to be an amendment to the master plan. This one is focused on the business areas of Alger Heights, Boston Square, Franklin and Eastern, Seymour Square, and Madison Square. We started the process in December of 2017, and we're excited to be here in front of you today. We've done a lot of great work. What we're asking from you today is to release the plan for its 42-day public review period, and then it would come back before Planning Commission in November, and then come before you in December if everything goes according to schedule for final adoption. And I have with me Oliver Kiley. He's our consultant from Smith Group out of Ann Arbor, and he's going to fill you in a bit more about the work we've done.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having us here today to present. Let's see if I can get my situation lined up here. This is a very unusual mouse, but I'm going with it. Let's see here. Okay, so not too long, but we just wanted to do a quick kind of presentation to bring everybody up to speed with the scope of the Southtown plan. So as Layla Islani mentioned, the Southtown Corridor Improvement District, we really looked at 5 different business areas centered mostly along Eastern Avenue. So Alger Heights, Boston Square, Franklin and Eastern, Madison Square, and Seymour Square. There is a portion of South Division that's part of the Southtown Corridor Improvement District as well, but that section was part of the South Division Corridor Plan that was approved to be released for its review period a few weeks ago by this body as well. Just a couple kind of overall notes. Really, this was a business area specific plan, so it was really focused on the commercial and business aspects of these corridors. But cutting across the whole plan was a real effort to help build equity, help build ownership, focus on wealth building, and that displacing people, displacing businesses, displacing residents was not a desired outcome of this plan. So it took great lengths to kind of help secure the stability and the future growth and vibrancy of the district. As Layla mentioned, this was about an 18-month process. Initially, it was a 9-month process that grew through our engagement efforts and our just ongoing kind of deepening discussions with the community into ultimately an 18-month process. You can see on the screen a lot of the different outreach activities from ambassador groups, public workshops. We did pop-up workshops in each of the different business districts where we actually dragged materials right into storefronts to meet with business owners and property owners. So it was a very comprehensive outreach effort. Now, part of this too, there was an extensive set of background data, including a retail market and space analysis that was conducted as part of this to help really guide and inform the land use decisions. So these are just some snapshots of some of the different engagement activities, from reaching out to businesses directly in the corridors to both written and online surveying. The photograph on the bottom was some of our ambassador training sessions where we had ambassadors help actually spread information and help engage businesses directly. So overall, big picture outcomes from the plan in terms of goals. These are the 4 main goals. I'm not going to read all the nuances to them on the right, but just a few things to highlight on the goals. Again, this is really about a thriving business community and to doing that without displacement. To really be a highly valued business community that celebrates and promotes cultural and neighborhood assets, be a more vibrant place to work, shop, play, learn, live, and do business, and to be a safer environment for everyone. So good things that we can all get behind. The plan itself, area-specific plans, or in this case, a business area-specific plan, these are called out in the master plan as an opportunity to dig into specific areas of the community at a greater level of detail and look at the exact kinds of land uses that are most appropriate to that local context. So in that way, this plan is kind of following the recommendations of the master plan. Overall, the Southtown BASP, the Business Area Specific Plan, makes recommendations in these 3 buckets. So future land use changes, which could ultimately go on to inform zoning decisions in the future, recommendations around physical improvements, and then recommendations around programs and policies. In particular, many of them, those are geared towards the wealth building, equity building kinds of things. So a few notes, I want to touch on kind of some highlights from each of these strategies as we go. Overall, from a future land use perspective, this builds off a lot of the existing zoning, but adds some important nuance into what we're identifying through our future land use plan. And overall, the desire is to create more flexibility for commercial and business opportunities throughout the district. So I'll touch on a little bit what that means in terms of establishing an industrial flex area and also traditional business area transition zones. And then we also, the plan advocates for preserving single-family areas to the extent possible. But it does recognize opportunities within some of these other commercial corridor areas for additional diversity or range of housing kinds of uses. So quick note, the industrial flex, this is the area that's in blue on the screen there, and this is the area that's currently identified as special district industrial in the current zoning plan. And what the recommendations are in this plan is to kind of rebrand that as an industrial flex area where a broader range of uses could come into that district. I'm not going to dig too much into the zoning, but I will say this, that what the plan calls for is basically saying all of the industrial uses that can be allowed today, either by right or special land use permit, would continue to exist. Additionally, all of the land uses that are allowed by right or with special land use permit in the TNTCC, that's the traditional city center, would also be allowed in that industrial flex area with the exception of residential uses. And the reason for the residential component is really to preserve the flexibility and the kinds of uses there for more commercial and job orientation. But then also on the flip side, it's also to encourage more residential development to happen in those traditional business areas as part of more mixed use projects where local businesses and shops can kind of take advantage of having that greater proximity to residential uses. So that's kind of an important distinction. On the TBA, so a lot of the area in the corridor today is zone TBA, which is traditional business area. And so on the map, the stuff that's in the darker red or in that kind of magenta color, today that's all TBA. And what this plan's recommending is to kind of split that between a core area that stays as TBA as it is today, which is the magenta area, and then the TBA transition area becomes areas outside of that, which again allows for a broader range of uses, and in particular, a broader range of ground floor uses that aren't necessarily intended to be active kind of commercial ground floor, but it could be things like professional offices, maker spaces, other kinds of uses, including the provision of being able to do housing in those areas via a special land use permit. So that, again, that's another area where we are creating some additional flexibility for those residential uses. And then just the last zoning point to touch on, we also LDR, which is low density residential. The LDR, we designated areas that are close to the TBA zones or the TBA transition areas as LDR transition, which again, the idea is to allow a little bit more flexibility in the kinds of uses that are in there. So the particular distinction here is that live-work units would be allowed by right, so that you can start to get that mixing of residential and employment opportunities kind of in those areas close to traditional business areas. So stepping away from the land use side of it, the plan also identifies a number of physical improvements. So each of the 5 business areas, there's kind of a core priority investment area that was identified, which is that the area, that magenta area that stays as TBA zone. So for each of those areas, we did a little district study that looked at a range of physical investment opportunities, infrastructure opportunities, kind of how those areas can continue to be built out or improved to support the businesses that are in those areas. And so a lot of these physical improvements, they looked on the private property side, creating more engaging and inviting alleys, things that can help connect people from parking lots that might be behind a building out to the storefronts on the front of the street, and to do that in a lively or artful way. Looking at parking facilities, more public gathering spaces, looking at green space needs, and then in particular for the Corridor Improvement District, setting up a facade investment program in those areas to help do building repairs and things like that. It also makes recommendations for the street environment from a capital improvement project standpoint, so things like site furnishings, street trees, landscape, improved street lighting in the business areas was a highly noted and important need that came out of our engagement, thinking about service and delivery zones and how those needs are really starting to change with autonomous vehicles and deliveries and all those kinds of things. And then lastly, physical recommendations around mobility, and a lot of this was really aligning the plan with plans that the Rapid has, aligning it with the Vital Streets effort, aligning it with the bicycle plan, so that from a mobility standpoint, this plan is in concert with those other initiatives in the city. Last couple slides, the strategies on the programs and policy piece. I'm not going to get into the details on these, but outlines a number of mechanisms for, again, helping to build a more equitable economy in the Southtown area to encourage business investment, increasing access to financing opportunities, strengthening local hiring practices. A lot of these kinds of strategies could be coupled to, say, community benefit agreements as part of development projects that might come in, so that Southtown is able to kind of tap into the benefits in the investments that are made. And then lastly, more broadly, strategies around supporting the health of the business districts overall. So helping to improve marketing and branding, more special events. Many of you probably know, like Rock the Block, that happens in the Madison Square area. And so are there other special events that can start to happen in each of the other districts as well to help bring people in and to help build more energy? So just to summarize some of the overall plan outcomes, this really builds on the master plan, but it takes the opportunity to look at these areas in a little bit more detail, and also recognizing it's been, almost 20 years since the last master plan was adopted, and so the context and the development climate has certainly changed, so wanting to be responsive to that, while also being very cognizant of concerns around gentrification and displacement and really taking that to heart in the planning process. That said, overall, the land use plan really opens up a lot more opportunity for a much greater range of uses and flexibility of uses. While it preserves and advocates for preserving single-family neighborhoods, it does create opportunity for additional housing in the TBA transition areas and in those LDR transition areas. So with that, it's been a little over 18 months since we got the plan set internally and have been starting to go through the approval process. So we're here September 24th, just again asking that City Commission release this plan for its 42-day review period, with the understanding that we'll be taking those comments in and responding to those comments, making changes to the plan as needed before that ultimately comes back to City Commission on November 14th and potentially back to City Commission on December 3rd or sometime around there. So with that, I just want to thank you all, and also we have many members of our steering committee here today as well as from the community. So I just want to thank everybody's participation and involvement in this process. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, commissioners, questions or comments? This is exciting. It's exciting to see this come forward. Appreciate your work on this, as well as all of the committee members who are here and the community that has been so actively engaged in this process. I'll start over here with Commissioner Lanier.
Thank you, Mayor. Oliver, you look great in a suit. I don't think I, over the 18 months, saw you in a suit.
All right, well, thank you.
No, thank you very much for all the time and energy that you spent with the members of the steering committee, and thank you to the co-chairs and other members who have participated over the long haul. And it was great to see that people continue to stick with this as we were going back and forth into the community, making sure that we got this plan right. Dr. Pulliam, I don't know if she's here, but one of the things that she continued to say was, this is our last chance to get this right. And so not wanting to rush through things, but to make sure that we were doing it based on what the community was providing. I think to my colleagues, this is unique in that this is a business area specific plan. And so our efforts really was to make sure that the business districts that are within Southtown are positively impacted. And so you'll see that it's a little bit unique from some of the other plans because it is based on the business districts, and we spent a lot of time analyzing the business districts and what the business districts need. And I like there's a slide in here on page 13 that even talks about what the future could look like for those business districts. And so this is our way of hopefully attracting developers to the business district to say to them, this is what we're looking to have right in our community. One of the interesting facts that we learned is that in the city of Grand Rapids and Southtown, we buy the most eggs or something like that. It was just like, how do you know this kind of stuff? But that's the kind of data we were going through as we were talking about retail in the corridor district. So thanks, Oliver. Thanks, everybody else. And thank you guys. And hopefully you'll agree with us to move it forward for 42 days.
Great, thanks. Commissioner Jones, and then I'll see if Commissioner Moody has a comment. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you for your very thorough overview, Mr. Kiley. I think it's safe to assume that this is not your first rodeo. And so based on your lived experience and the work that you've done in the past in other parts of the country, when you look at what has been put together here, would you say that what's included in this are legitimate deterrents to gentrification? I know that is a major concern with this area, with this plan, this idea that this is probably the last real opportunity for, in particular, communities of color, African American, Latino community to really be able to grab hold of economic prosperity along the business side. And just wondering if, based on your travels and other studies that you've done and other plans that you've taken part in, would you say that there are legitimate deterrents to gentrification included in here?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. I think, overall, this is a topic that's certainly not unique to Grand Rapids, although here in Southtown, it is particularly acute. This is something that cities all across the country are really grappling with right now. And there is unfortunately no sort of magic bullet that anybody's found yet to sort of tackle that.
I thought you had it. I'm sitting here disappointed right now. I was gonna.
Well, I'm getting to it though.
All right, go ahead.
That said, I mean, I think there's a lot of layering of strategies that go into it. And I think one of the most important ones that this plan helps set the stage for is that sort of local control and empowerment that comes out of a planning opportunity like this. So I didn't speak to it in the presentation, but I think one of the mechanisms that's really important is that the local community have a mechanism or a process to be able to get, development projects, whatever they may be, and to sort out the kinds of community benefit agreements that might need to happen to really have those benefits be realized by the community. There needs to be a process put in place that can let that happen so that projects can't just skip over the community and go right to, a higher level body first for approval. So one of the things we had looked at in this process would be, setting up a process where any kind of development project would have to go to, say, the Southtown SID board and get their engagement, get community buy-in through that mechanism before they can go to the next step, say going to Planning Commission for approval or something. That becomes a way to start to make sure that, any opportunities that are coming in are getting connected with the specific needs that the community might have, whether that's, for a local hiring practice or ensuring that, if a new multi-family building is getting built, that maybe some of those units are condos and that they're being sold so that people can build wealth, and that maybe they're even being sold to the people whose properties they got bought, were bought out of first, so that the local community has an opportunity to buy in. So there's a bunch of pieces to this plan like that all kind of connect together. So I think certainly for Grand Rapids and in any of the work that I've done, this one's really has pushed that pretty far. So I'm pretty excited about how that all came together.
Okay. One other question too. We talked about, or the plan talks about the industrial flex. Again, in your travels and in your past work, what have you seen in terms of efforts to address the idea or the plan of, how prevalent is the idea of industrial in the urban core? Are you seeing more of that throughout the country? Are you seeing less of that?
Well, actually, surprisingly, we're seeing quite a bit of those kinds of things. So we did a few years ago, we finished up a comprehensive plan along with their zoning update in Lansing, which had identified a very similar kind of industrial flex mix of uses along their Oakland-Saginaw corridor, or not Oakland-Saginaw, Cedar Larch corridor, if you're familiar with a lot of that, right across the river from downtown Lansing. And a lot of my colleagues have worked on land use planning in Detroit, where it's been a very similar sort of mix, and where you can have that, close to neighborhoods or close to, residential or mixed use areas, you can get a lot of good kind of synergy between jobs and employment and housing. So it's definitely seen, so.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Commissioner Moody?
Yes, I want to thank you for this report. I looked at it over the weekend, and I was very happy and impressed with it, and want to give my colleagues some kudos for being on the Southtown SID Board. The second thing is that I want to know, out of the 5 business areas, which is great, how many businesses are in each of those areas? Probably may not be able to tell me that right now, but in the future, please let me know.
Okay.
How many are in the Alger, the Boston, the Franklin, and the Madison and the Seymour Square area? And then I would like to know, with South Division being a part of this, why is it that they're under a separate process?
Yeah.
I can answer the question about the number of businesses. So Southtown, the board, hired a consultant to do an inventory of all of the businesses. So on the webpage, you can see the count of the businesses, and I think you can sort it by district, so you can see the count by district to speak to what you're asking. I think the other question to the South Division is that at the time when we were launching this plan, South Division was also going through their process too. And so because the portion of South Division that belongs to Southtown, because it was going to be a part of this broader division discussion, at that moment we said, okay, we'll let that discussion happen along the entire division corridor as opposed to trying to bring it into Southtown. But I think in their plan, they're mentioning us and we're mentioning South Division there. So I think there may be a way of, when they're both adopted, to bring the information from South Division into this plan and kind of speak to the portion of Southtown that is on Division.
And I ask that question because there is a business on Jefferson Street that does not know if it's in any of these areas, but I think it's more close to the South Division that want to be a part of the uptown, a part of the Southtown SID. So I just needed to know how that can happen in what areas of businesses that are in those areas that are perhaps need to be a part of some of these as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thanks,
So I need to
Commissioner.
talk to you. I need to talk to you.
Yeah, we can talk about that. Mhm.
Commissioner Kelly?
Yeah, I wanted to say congratulations to hard work. The industrial flex area reminds me a lot of Monroe North, and that has been very successful. I mean, there are always some challenges around movement of trucks, that sort of thing, that city staff has done a wonderful job helping to resolve, but it's been you just look at it now, it's been a wonderful process. You see retail, you see walkable areas, and we live side by side with some industry, which provides jobs. So people can walk right out the door and to work in some cases. I think it's wise that you're allowing some ground floor housing. I noticed that it was maybe allowed via special land use permit. We've noticed that in some cases, and this is largely due to some of the state rules, that if you go up on Hastings, for example, we have some retail space that hasn't been occupied, and if it can't be because it's just not the right place, certainly we want to be able to have housing in those areas. That struck me as an excellent thing. Your comment about eggs, very interesting, because I think that's one of the things that I hope that we can really focus on as a commission in the next couple of years as we work to develop all of our business districts, is to figure out what's available and what's missing. So look at that leakage and therefore go out and market for filling in those amenities that our neighbors will want and need, and they can shop local. And finally, very excited about your mention of facade improvements. There's nothing like a little bit of a grant to encourage businesses to invest in their own space. So that's very exciting. So congratulations. And thank you for your work.
Yeah, great. All right, with that, I will call the question. And again, Commissioners, you can see the timeline before us up on the screen. It's also in the PowerPoint and in the resolution. So with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. Thank you. All right, next that will take us to a resolution authorizing certain special events subject to Chapter 53 of the City Code.
So moved.
All right, we have Ms. Pittman coming up to talk to us about this.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
So these are our special events that will be occurring during fall and early winter, and we're so excited. Such vibrancy is going on in our city. Many more events are happening, and we are truly becoming a four-season city.
Great. All right, Commissioners, any questions?
Good work.
Yeah, we love to see spaces activated, so thank you.
Are these the events only for September,
No, it goes through December.
December? Okay, I didn't see December on here. Did I miss something?
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, and last thing on our agenda before I ask us to go into executive session, and that is an update on the timeline for filling the comptroller vacancy. So Commissioners, after our discussion at our last commission meeting, I followed up with a conversation with our city clerk. I also had a chance to meet with our deputy city comptroller there in the back, Ruth Letters, and we talked about just making sure that her office has the support that they need during this transition period. And she assured me that she is, and her team is well equipped to carry on during this vacancy and transition. So what we have before us is a recommended process, and the most important piece of this is when we start accepting applications. So we are proposing to open up application period October 1, accept applications for a full month until the end of October, so October 31st. And then based on the number of applicants we get, we can have a conversation about whether we want, as a full body, to hear all of those first-round interviews or if we want to have a subcommittee. So that was something we talked about at our last meeting. I put some tentative dates in here. Hopefully, we'll be able to get through first-round interviews in November, have some type of public hearing, maybe a reception for the final candidates, make a decision in December with a potential start date with the new year. So that is what's being proposed. Any recommended changes? Are we all good with that? All right, so the city clerk has been working with our communications team to get a press release out about this. We'll make sure it's on our website. Commissioners, I also sent to you an attachment. It has about 5 paragraphs about the position. Again, based on the feedback around this table, it's really clear about what's required under our charter, and then how to apply and who to contact for questions. So I don't need to take a formal vote. This was just an update. From here, the city clerk will take it away and keep us posted and updated. The clerk's office, after the closing on October 31st, will vet all of the candidates and let us know out of those who applied who is eligible, and then we can make decisions after that on how best to move forward, either as a full body or as a subcommittee. All right, great. And I want to give a big heartfelt thank you to Ruth for her work and her entire team, and for really being willing to step up and do some extra work over the next several months until we identify a new comptroller. So thank you. So Commissioners, I have a note here before me. I'm going to give this back to our city manager. Our city manager has someone he'd like to introduce us to, and then I will call the question to go into executive session.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. I wanted to briefly recognize a new member of our team, a new member of the fire department. Chief Lehman has hired Ms. Allison Farrell, who is formerly the emergency coordinator for the city of Charlottesville, as well as the University of Virginia and the county in that area. She comes to us well prepared with a master's in public administration, with a specialty in homeland security and emergency preparedness, and we're glad to have her on board. She will be staffing our newly created emergency management administrator that will help us in our disaster planning and recovery, and making sure that we are vigilant and looking towards the future always. Welcome aboard.
All right, so Commissioners, I'm going to ask us to go into executive session for 2 items. We have, the first one will be around legal opinion, and then the second is this afternoon at 2:30 for update with our city clerk. So this is a roll call vote. I'll start down here. Commissioner Hart?
Yes. Need a motion first.
Oh, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, thank you.
Yes.
Commissioner Hart? Commissioner Moody?
Yes.
Commissioner Kelly?
Yes.
Commissioner Lanier?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor?
Yes.
Commissioner Jones?
My answer is yes.
Thank you, and I'm a yes. So Commissioners, please go down to the law office, into the conference room there.
Everybody else.